Welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living, a show where we talk to experts who've taken a wild idea and made it a reality so you can too. From people who have sailed around the world to those who've started thriving businesses and even broken records, some of the wildest ideas can lead to the most rewarding adventures. I'm your host, Shelby Stanger, and I hope you enjoy this show. This is episode 13 with adventure photographer Chris Burkard. This episode was brought to you by Prana. Prana makes clothing for all kinds of adventures, from yoga to climbing, surfing, after surf, even work. We pretty much wear Prana product every day. Best of all, they're built to move with your body. So for surfing, swimsuits stay on, which is awesome. Shorts flex even when you're reaching your legs in weird climbing spots and in yoga. And dresses are constructed to go from the beach to a meeting or a date, which is great for me because I don't love changing. You can wake up, get dressed, and hit the road. Also, for those who care, Prana keeps the environment in mind when they make all their products. You can check out Prana's sustainability video series at prana.com. And right now, if you go to the website and enter the code WILDIdeas, you'll get 20% off full-priced items. Today we have on Chris Burkard. Chris is an award-winning adventure photographer, most known for his work in freezing cold water spots like Iceland. He's young, only about 30 years old. He's traveled all over the world to get shots for brands like Sony, Prana, magazines like Outside, Surfer, Surfing, and he now has 4 books, even a kid's book. We talk a lot about hustle, about sacrifice, about pain, about freezing cold water and what it's like to be absolutely submerged in it. We talk about body surfing, yoga, managing people, giving a TED Talk, juggling a family, and a lot more. Chris called in after sleeping for only a few hours from editing a film project, but it's a great episode for anyone who works for themselves, anyone interested in photography, anyone who loves to travel, or anyone looking for a little inspiration. I hope you enjoy the show. All right, today we have Chris Burkard. Chris, welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living. We're really excited to have you on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
So you slept for a few hours last night. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I feel like the older I get, the less sleep I'm allowed to have. The projects that we're doing always just require this this kind of superhuman time schedule that I'm not really always able to keep.
Well, let's just get right into that. I mean, you've had a lot of wild ideas in your life, and right now, your wild ideas are requiring you to balance a lot. You're a family man, and you're always on the road. Can we just get right into talking about how you balance, your wild life with having a family?
Yeah, that's a good one. To be honest, it's a crazy thing to consider this concept that you can have, and it's possible to still kind of live this sort of almost, I guess, nomadic in many ways, lifestyle where you're constantly moving, you're constantly traveling and going places, but at the same time, you're deeply rooted into a community and having a sense of community and having this family life. That's really, obviously, it's the most important thing to me. And I think that one concept is that people think I'm gone like 9 months out of the year, which totally isn't true. Most of the trips that I do are really only between, 5 days to 5 days to 2 weeks or something like that. So the reality is what I really try to do, and what I've learned is that there is a couple kind of tricks and things that really make a huge difference. And I guess the one thing I always say is I would rather be somebody who is gone a large portion of the time, but when I'm home, I'm really there, and I'm really immersed into that family life, and I'm there for my kids, and I'm there for my wife and everything, as opposed to somebody who works a 9 to 5, but when they get home, it's just kind of they're burnt out, right? So who's to really say one is better than the other? But ultimately, what I find is the ways in which I try to keep that relationship strong and going is just by really good communication. when I'm on the road, I don't really want to come home and have my kids wonder where I've been. If I haven't been communicating to them, sending them videos, keeping them updated, like taking the extra time to kind of let them feel like they're a part of the experience with me.
Oh, that's cool. That
makes all the difference. It allows them to kind of feel this like, they know where I've been. They know what I've been doing. We've talked about it, this and that. And then I also just try to never text. Like texting is great, but you often get lost in the conversation. You don't know the person's tone of voice. You don't know what they're going through. It's hard to read a person that way. And so I found that.
Wait, you're a guy and you don't text? I think this should be relationship advice too. This is great.
I'm just not a huge fan of like when I've been on the road, like just texting someone every day. Like that doesn't really work. You have to I find that like, being able to do like FaceTime video and show somebody where you are and talk with them. And that's crucial, and yeah, your phone bill is going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's better than having therapy bills. So I guess in many ways, like that's the kind of thing that I try to do when I'm home. I live in a small town on a purpose. I want to be in a place that I feel like I can be disconnected from like work and not like people can just access me super easily. So I think that all those factors really play into this concept of being able to be on the road and have that time.
So what do you do to really, being present sounds like is really, really important for you. From the photos you shoot to just family life, what do you do to make sure you're present, on a daily basis? Are there routines you do?
Yeah.
Like yoga or meditation?
Yeah. Yoga is a huge part of my life. I've practiced yoga for maybe like 6 years or more, and even took the time to do a teacher training just so I could learn a little more about it.
Nice.
But I find that with, just good breathing techniques and having a routine is crucial, for me. It's so funny because for somebody who's constantly inundated with new cultures and people and et cetera, I'm a total creature of habit, and I love getting into my rhythm. There's that feeling like you get home and you're eating your favorite Mexican food and you're doing, you're in bed at a certain time. There's all these kind of things that I feel like make life so much better and easier for me as a person when I do them. So,
what type of yoga did you do a teacher training in?
It was just basically like an Iyengar based kind of vinyasa thing, but it was a lot of meditation, and it was a lot of what's it called, Ayurvedic medicine as well, and so it was it was a longer, not so much like a quick 2-week thing, but it was like a 6-month on and off sort of teacher training. It was really cool. It was kind of one of the highlights of my life, I guess I'd say.
I actually recently did one. I did the intensive. I had 2 weeks. I did a vinyasa based one, but yeah, I don't teach yoga, but it really helped. It helped with everything, just my practice, how I approach it.
Totally. And there's honestly afterwards, you're kind of like, you realize there's two stages of your life before that and life after.
It's totally true. And now I'm so much more flexible. What kind of breathing techniques you do?
I think for me, it's more just about learning to extend your breath and learning to, not necessarily like meditation's great. And I totally do that. But I think on a day-to-day basis, it's more about just breathing deeper, slower, longer. That whole mindset that like breath is life is like really funny, but I think it's actually true. And the person that breathes the longest lives the longest, right? So I find that that's crucial. I think if there's one thing that we all do is we probably take in not enough oxygen, right? So for me, that's been really just kind of something to learn about, and kind of educate myself on.
Yeah, this is a topic. Breathing is something I'm really passionate about. And I've been doing research for a friend who has a book coming out on breathing, and I think it's not till 2018 or 19. But it's a fascinating topic that is everything in life. And he said we're doing it all wrong. So pretty totally interesting. So besides breathing, I did some stories this year about Wim Hof and breathing in cold water. Now, you love cold water. Can you talk to me a little bit about the allure of cold water spots? You've been to maybe talk about some of the cold water spots you've been. And
yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'll just let you go.
I mean, the last 10 years have really been focused, or maybe the last 8 years have really been focused on cold water surfing. In the beginning of my career, I did go to all those warm locations, the Tahitis, Indonesia, and Bali, yada, yada, yada. I mean, all Mexico, all that stuff's cool. Yeah, I love it. It's super cool, but it's kind of just not really my thing. And I feel like I sort of came into my own when I realized that the places I wanted to be were remote and desolate. And oftentimes that's where there's cold water. It wasn't so much cold water is the draw. It's the locations that it exists in. Right. So I've always sought out that kind of like beautiful, open, vast landscape, that I've come to love in photography. And really, the cold water is just, I guess it's a part of the deal. It's a part of the program. You kind of have to get on board with it, and it's not comfortable and it's not easy. And I don't really necessarily love it, in terms of like the way it makes me feel, but I love what it brings and I love what it offers, desolate, empty waves on, remote beaches of the world where not a single soul is around. Like that to me is what it's all about. And, I guess there's something that just, makes you feel so much more alive when you're able to kind of sacrifice a little more, for the places you go and the photos that you get, that's such a value.
You talk a little bit about sacrifice in your TED Talk. I love that TED Talk.
Thank you.
Can you just tell me a little bit more about like where did this idea of sacrificing for a photo come from, or to get something good? It involves some sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to beat it in people's heads. I feel like it's such an obvious thing that when you work for something, it feels more valuable. It's the same reason why camp food is always better than a meal, because you're like anything when you're camping is great because you just hike there, whatever it is. So
that's true.
It's kind of a simple mindset that, when we give something of ourselves, we ultimately gain so much more when we achieve that, when we come to that. And with my TED Talk, the thing that I was really interested in was I studied this psychologist for a little bit, and his name is Brock Bastian. He's an Australian guy, and he studied the psychology of pain, right? And then the importance of pain and how it affects us. And one of the craziest things that he found out was that people who had experienced pain in some way had actually been able to feel a little deeper. And I'll explain that. He did some tests where he had given this kind of scented water or scented whatever to 2 different case groups. And one of them had experienced some type of physical trauma or some type of emotional duress. And the other hadn't experienced anything. And the ones that had experienced something, they could pick up the scent 10-1 over the others. Mm. And so what I found and I realized is that, okay, if pain, and whatever that pain might be, whether you're cold, whether you're this, whether you're that, if you can get to a place where you are, it's not like taking over your life, it can actually bring you more in the moment. It can allow you to feel a more and greater visceral experience. So for me, it's like when I'm giving something of myself, even if it's just freezing or standing on a cold beach or, hours and hours of planning or whatever that is, something that I'm sacrificing, it allows me to just feel a deeper, that's just that's just the simplest way to put it.
I love that. I'm going to put that talk or that link in the show notes, because I'm really interested in how, some of our most painful moments can transform into some of these magical moments.
Yeah.
So you've shot some wild things and you've done some wild things to get a photo. Is there a wild experience you have that really sticks out, that took a bit of sacrifice to get the shot?
Well, yeah, I think that the photo that I usually reference when I'm thinking of this is the Aleutians, photograph of this volcano with a surfer. And the reason that was so crazy was it wasn't actually the thing where it was the most stressful or the biggest struggle of, it was more about basically me having to give 2 to 3 years of my life kind of helping to plan to make this place happen. And everything from just the concept of looking at a map to, calling and planning to getting there to like freezing morning after freezing morning on a quad, driving like 30 miles to the beach and yada, yada, yada. And I think to have that photograph as a culmination of all of that effort was just, it was just such a reward. It was such a huge, massive reward. And I think that's just kind of what, I don't know. That's just like the thing that really got me,
Yeah, that's a beautiful photo. I saw that at the Prana booth at Outdoor Retailer. So I want to talk,
right.
there's a saying, was it the archer or the arrow? And everyone says, no, it's Chris. It's not his equipment. I've talked to a lot of people who know you. You do landscape photography, but you also shoot, people for ads or whatever, surfers. You've shot some diverse people, many I've worked with through my work at Body Glove, some of the same surfers. So I want to talk a little bit about the process of getting people in a photo. What are the tricks you use to get subjects to basically feel more comfortable? Are you a comedian, a psychologist? Can you tell me about the different jobs you have to be to get people to be comfortable?
That's funny. Well, I think that it's different in every stage. When you're shooting a portrait, I tell people about this a lot. There's so many different things you need to do. And to be honest, my work isn't really about I don't really like to work with, nor do I get excited about working with professional models all the time, ever, almost. So given that, it's not like I'm out there okay, just do this. I'm usually working with friends, or I'm somewhere in a remote part of the world and I'm just shooting random people, and so what I've always told younger photographers is just this concept that basically if you want to create a moment where something feels intimate, then you have to create that intimacy. If you're in India and you're shooting street photography of people and you don't want them to feel like you're there trying to, photograph them or whatever, and they're going to ask you for money, then I always tell people you should always meet them first and put your camera down and just interact with them. And also, the smaller the equipment you have, the less, and the less space you create between you and your subject, physical space, the smaller camera, the more intimate that experience is going to be, hands down. It's such a value because you're able to kind of bypass some of this awkwardness of you have this big DSLR and you're there to shoot a photograph or whatever it is. So when I'm shooting people in that scenario, whether it's street photography in Cuba or wherever I've been, I really try to just bring the smallest gear that I can. And this is why, people who are shooting with iPhones out there in the world are creating beautiful work because nobody's afraid of an iPhone. People aren't fearful of something like that. Everybody knows what it is, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the reality is who's having a more intimate experience, that person or the person with a huge DSLR and a big camera bag? Well,
no, that's a technique I use with interviews. If I bring a recorder to an interview, people are completely intimidated. When I just put my my iPhone on the table and hit record, people just forget it's there because they're so used to seeing iPhones.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's really casual, and I think that it comes the same with when I'm on a trip shooting tourism and I'm working with somebody, and I really like to have the ability, and it's not always like this. I mean, just to be honest, some days I've got to go shoot something random for a tech brand, and we have to get the shot and get it and go, and that's fine. But ultimately, I never want to ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do, right? That's first and foremost typically. And then secondly, if I'm going somewhere, it's the end of a long hike, or we've kind of finally reached this vista or wherever it is, and I really want to add some context to this location or subject or place, then I think just simply asking somebody to be a part of your image is usually an honor for people. They get excited, it's not it shouldn't be this thing where it's oh, again, not again, and I find that the photos that I shoot, I usually think of it in a way where I want this to be a photo that somebody else would be stoked to be a part of, right? Where, if it was me, I would want this picture. And I think that's kind of the feeling we try to create, Yeah, is an element of accessibility there.
So some of our listeners, they just want to take better photos with their iPhones. Do you have any tips or tricks if you want to take a better photo with your iPhone right now?
When it comes to like our equipment, our iPhone, whatever, like learn how to use it. That's the first thing. Know it so well that it becomes like the back of your hand. And the more you know it, the more you can experiment, right? The less intimidating it feels. And the less intimidating it feels, the easier it's going to be to just kind of, pull out at a moment's notice and just try to create something cool. The other thing is just understanding its strengths and weaknesses. iPhones, they don't look good when you're shooting right into the sun. So you need to find ways to diffuse the sun or find ways to kind of create, I don't know, some sort of an atmosphere where you aren't just shooting into a big ball of light, because the way that the sensors work, they can't read it that well. So what I find is like learn the strengths and weaknesses of your camera, and then really try to apply those principles. That's a big thing for me. There's so much more, to be honest, but it's a little challenging without like demonstrating.
Totally good. No, we did a story. Actually, I interviewed you for some Outside Magazine story, and it was about festival season. And you gave 3 tips, and I'm trying to pull them up right now, but you gave 3 really good tips on how to take better photos at festivals. I'll just put that in the show notes because I can't find it right now. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about being a professional photographer. How do you started in surf magazines? And I know it's like to write for surf magazines. So how did you go from making $170 a spread to making real money as a photographer? And maybe you can talk a little bit about what real money is as a photographer, because I know that varies based on the person, but I think you're making real money. You've got a studio and a team, and you're doing great.
Yeah. I mean, in all transparency, we do fairly well. I mean, my business is mostly nowadays commercial photography, and we shoot a little bit of editorial photography for magazines, and a big part of my business is image licensing, and then surprisingly, a very small part of my business is social media or social influencer. Selling prints and the merchandise and things like that is probably a lot larger part of our business. But the thing I'm getting at is that diversification is crucial. That's one of the most important things. Never get attached to one thing, because that one thing, I can't tell you how many times in my life, that I was simply just focusing on this retainer with this magazine, or working with this one client, or whatever it is, or kind of being the best in one space, so to say, like, and I realized later on that like I had to operate and function in a couple different ways. And so now we really, our income is kind of based upon those five or six kind of streams of revenue. And nowadays what I find is that leaping into commercial photography is great. It's super rewarding. It pays well. But if you are only doing that and there's not an element of like personal projects or anything that's like, that makes you feel, I don't know, like you're doing something that's rewarding, it can be really frustrating. And it can really suck. So that being said, my transition really came about because I was shooting a lot of surfing, right? And I was shooting not only surfing, but surf lifestyle. And my book, The California Surf Project, was one of the most important things I think I've ever done, because it demonstrated my ability, I guess you could say, to kind of shoot all the peripheries around surfing. Mm-hmm. And so that's the stuff that people really cared about, the brands cared about, and so there was a lot of wineries, and there was a lot of wine labels and random tourism, people that were basically started licensing my images later in my career. I'm talking a couple of years later, because they recognize some sort of kind of iconic classic approach to trying to, shoot surfing. And so the photographs from my California Surf Project, or the photographs from my personal projects, not necessarily the trips, the hardcore surf trips to to go to, the Mentawais or to, wherever, that wasn't the stuff they really cared about. They cared about the kind of the periphery stuff, the things that everybody can relate to. So I realized really quickly that, hey, if I wanted to continue to shoot that type of commercial work or appeal to them, it had to be more universally accepted. No logos, not driven by this person or this person. It had to be something that like any person could relate to. And that's really what started to help me to find my own style.
But my guess is it wasn't really just the end result you were producing. I've heard from many people, including Chris Morrow, who's an editor at Surfer, that you hustle, that you are just a straight up hustler. You've got an incredible work ethic. So I want you to really talk about what it takes to make the leap from, being on retainer for a surf magazine and working with brands like Sony, Prana. You work with a lot of really big brands, and then being able to do your own project and doing kids' books and photography books and teaching classes and doing TED Talks. That doesn't happen overnight.
That's a lot of questions.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm going to try to answer all of them, but
maybe just talk about the hustle.
Well, the hustle. Okay. I mean, that's easy. Like if you're getting into this career to like basically have some, think that it's all going to fall into your lap, then like I would just reevaluate, because it took me years of like living in my car and eating questionable Mexican food. And self-funding trips. I had the crappiest equipment you could ever imagine for years. And I was okay with that because I knew that I didn't need the best gear. I felt like pretty, you have to live a pretty minimalistic existence if you want to get to a place where you can make it, and ideally making it means really nothing. I'm still hustling now. That's the point. And I think that that's not a mindset where it's like you ever get to a place where it's all good, it's all over, you've made it, it's a perpetual mindset. It's a perpetual way of thinking. And I think that one of the biggest things about hustling is it's not just like going out and working hard. It's basically detaching yourself from anything that's going to detract from you not achieving your goal. Right. And so I would say a hustle is maybe not as much of a romantic word as like passion. You have to have passion, right? Because passion trumps everything. Passion is the thing that ultimately will give you the ability to kind of wake up at 5 a.m. when you don't want to wake up, or choose to like not go to that party because you're going to just not end up being able to get to the beach the next day, or whatever that it is. Like I turned down a lot of things in my life for this career, and I guess what I want to do is make sure people understand that it's not an easy thing, and I don't really know how else to put it.
No, I think you put it really well. Passion trumps everything. But I think it's also the way you speak with your clients, because there's getting the photo, but then it's dealing with these clients. It seems like you surround yourself with really good people. I read that you took 6 months to prepare for your TED Talk. Who coached you? How did that TED Talk come to be? Where did you learn to talk? I'm wondering if as a kid you were religious too. So I don't know if you're religious and you learned, because a lot of people I know who are really good speakers spend a lot of time going to church or temple or whatever it was.
I am definitely a very religious person. Absolutely. But I don't think that was what gave me the ability to speak. Mm-hmm. I think that to be honest, I'm not a good speaker. I'm not somebody who can like just go up in front of a crowd of people and like deliver whatever. But what I find is that when I'm talking about something that I'm passionate about, it's easy for me to share an experience. And so the way I looked at my TED Talk was like, okay, I'm not up there trying to talk about something I'm uneducated about. I'm just there talking about what I love and what I care about. And so that made it a lot easier. And I did. It took 6 months and 17 revisions for me to do that talk. And I'm not going to lie to you, like everything you see in that 9 minutes, that was everything I had. That was everything I had in like to give. The hardest thing about the talk was like, imagine somebody coming to you and saying, hey, Shelby, we want you to give and deliver the only kernel of truth you have to offer in the world. To a global stage, and it's probably gonna be the most important talk you ever do in your life. So yeah, I can't wait to hear it. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they're asking you to do. And so for me, it was a matter of like, I had to first figure out what that was, what that important thing was. And ultimately I started out with a coach. I didn't really see eye to eye with her because she wanted it to be something else. And so I canceled that, and I basically just started to work with my wife helped me out a lot. And then I had a friend who She's just a like a literary teacher and at a college here, and so she kind of helped me formulate it into like she helped me keep my thesis in my singular point like in focus the whole time, because that was sort of the thing. It's like bumper cars, you so easily want to go off on a diatribe about something that's maybe unrelated or is sort of related but doesn't really make sense. And so that was kind of the thing, is like I had to really hone it in.
It's really good. So we're going to put a link. We're going to put a link in the show notes because I really like that TED Talk and it's visually stunning. So you need to watch it. Jeff Hawke from Prana also told me you gave a great talk at the Lux Institute in Cardiff recently, or I don't know when it was, but it was a unique perspective about protecting the environment. All sorts of surf photographers for years are like, let's not shoot this place, or I mean, not even just surf photographers, outdoor photographers, let's not shoot this place because we don't want people to know about it. We want to keep it sacred. You have a different take on the environment and shooting, I guess, sacred, beautiful places. Can you talk a little bit about that perspective?
Yeah. I grew up in this like eggy, like, Central Coast, like
can only imagine
deal, to be honest, it sucked. Like when I was
you don't talk about the surf spots is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. It was one of those things where, just growing up and realizing that there are people that do not like what you do, like, and that's okay. And I realized that I needed to have a sensitivity to that stuff. And I kind of realized that it's all about your approach, right? It's all in your approach. If I'm out there shooting something and it's just to glorify myself, then what good am I doing that place, but if I'm out there shooting something and it's really to bring an awareness to a place that needs to be either protected, preserved, or shared, and it's going to benefit the place, then that is where I draw the line. That's where I try to make sure everything falls underneath that umbrella. Got
it. So I want to go back to the ocean. You are a surfer. You've been a surfer probably since you were a kid, is my guess. Where do you like to be most in the ocean? Do you like to be in it? Do you like to be shooting it? Do you like to be riding waves?
My favorite thing is like a, 1 foot to 2 foot overhead hollow day where it breaks close to shore and you're just getting tubes. And I honestly, all I care about nowadays is body surfing. I don't really like ever stand up surf anymore. Like I used to go longboard a lot, and I was never into shortboarding ever, but I used to go longboard a lot and I really enjoyed that. But to be honest, like nowadays, all I care about is just body surfing. The reason being is because it just takes you out of all of the competition, takes you out of this whole mindset of like, oh yeah, I got to go and, try and get barreled. It's a great day and you're out in the lineup, with shoulder to shoulder with people. And I realized that when I body surf, every day is a good day, every day. And I get more exercise. I stay more fit. I'm able to like appreciate what I'm doing because I'm just kind of lurking on the inside, getting tubes after tubes. And I always leave smiling in some way. And so that's just like what is the funnest thing for me. I did grow up at the beach. My whole life I've been at the beach. My first memories are my mom like pushing me off a boogie board when I was like, a couple years old, telling me the ocean's my friend. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's something that I'm just constantly learning how to appreciate the ocean in different ways. Like it's gone through stages.
I'm just imagining you body surfing on the Central Coast, which I get scared on a surfboard out there just because I think about the theme song for Jaws the whole time. So you're brave. I know it's beautiful out there. We're not going to talk about it because it's where you live, and I'll let you keep that sacred. I've seen you do a lot of Arctic stuff. Any desire to do any South Pole, Antarctic stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I mean, I would love to, but I've been trying to get down to Chile for a while, back to Chile, Patagonia for a while now. And I'd really love to go explore that zone. There's honestly like no place that I'm not interested in going and seeing. There's just certain places that I know are going to be more valuable for work and stuff like that.
Do you have a favorite wave you love shooting?
A favorite wave? shoot, it's not so much a favorite wave as much as it is like a favorite place.
Mm-hmm.
The east coast of Iceland is like so raw and undiscovered in many ways that I really enjoy I just enjoy the landscape a lot. And I enjoy I don't know, it's like any wave that's fickle with no people around and an amazing backdrop is really all I care about. There's not like a favorite specific wave,
I think, yeah, I can imagine you having a lot of fun in Africa. Not as cold, but
maybe. Yeah. Honestly, it's funny. I've never really had a draw to go to Africa.
Really?
I don't know why. Yeah.
What about New Zealand?
New Zealand. I've been there twice, and it's one of my favorite places on earth.
Yeah, we lived there. It's just incredible.
Super rad.
What are tips and tricks for traveling long distances with lots of gear? And not just, I know you on your website you can find all the gear you travel with, but what's your trick for just, everything else when you travel long distance?
I think that it's funny actually. I'm a total OCD organization freak. And so the only thing I can tell you is that there's nothing that I'm going to be able to say that it's going to make sense because everybody's different. But what I've found is that when I go on a trip, I pack and I take what I need. And then when I get home or I'm on the airplane home, I usually take the time to write a list and I say, what did I not use? What did I use? And you'll usually find you brought too much of something and not enough of something else. And so I refine that list over and over and over and over. And I kind of have okay, I have a kit. This is what I need for cold water. I only need these, or a cold trip. I only need this much stuff. Or this is what I need for, a warm trip. I only need, one pair of board shorts the whole time. I don't know. And I find just that refining process. If we come home and we're just okay, I'm done, throw your bags down. You don't really learn anything from it. So that's kind of a big thing for me. Just how do I live an examined life, and I honestly love to be able to just simplify my process always.
Yeah, it seems like you try to be as minimal as possible. What were you doing in Yosemite? Can I just ask? I know you were there last week.
Yeah, I basically did this backcountry ski touring trip out to Glacier Point during basically one of the biggest snowstorms in 15 years, and it was insane. Basically 8 feet of powder. It was incredible. We were skiing on these in this zone that I wouldn't have even stood on before because it was so steep and gnarly. And it was incredible. It was the coolest way to see it, but getting there was a freaking nightmare. It was just a slog, my feet were killing me and the whole trip was gnarly because the road hadn't been groomed or anything, so it was pretty full on. Plus I think hauling 100 pounds of gear made it a little more challenging.
So did you skin up or,
Yep. Yeah, we skinned up.
Okay. Wow. And what's going to happen with it? Is it going to be a movie? Is it going to be
No, we're just going there for fun. Just going there for fun. I shot a couple photos, it wasn't for any client. I think that's critical for me, at least, is trying to always do things that are just it was a bucket list item. I was I always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to go there and see it in the winter. And so it was my opportunity to go.
Good for you. So technology is really changing everything right now. We went from film to digital. Now there's drones. Do you have a prediction on what's next?
Shoot. What is next? I don't know. I honestly, I'm not a huge technology buff. I'm not the guy who knows what's coming out next, because I guess in some ways, I kind of try not to rely on it. I feel the sooner that you try to rely on technology to create or make your work better, or you're this, then it's a trend that you don't know how long it's going to last, and I would really rather be focusing on stuff that's timeless, and an aesthetic that's really going to be interesting in the next 20, 30 years, not to say I love drone photography. I love all that stuff. It's just not what I focus on a ton. Are
you shooting video or mostly still?
Mostly still. I don't really ever shoot video, but I direct quite a bit, and I've directed a lot of TV spots and motion work. So yeah.
our time is coming to an end. I've really enjoyed. I appreciate your time. I know you didn't sleep, so really appreciate you
No,
waking up to talk to me.
okay.
Just a couple quick questions. If you could go back in time and give your 15-year-old self a piece of advice, what would you give him?
Easy. I would tell myself that basically the sooner you start doing the things that you know and going to the places that you know you're passionate about, the quicker your career is going to take off. For years, for example, I traveled to places that I was going to because I knew my editors wanted me to go to places that I knew they'd be stoked on and this and that. And those places are great, super cool. But the problem was that stuff, after it's gone in the magazine, it's gone. There's nothing else to it. There's nothing really that important or long lasting. And so I feel like when I started to travel to places that were more meaningful to me, travel to places that were more timeless and had were interesting, and they took longer to go there, and et cetera, they became more valuable because that's the type of work that I still sell today. I still relicense today, and I still holds a lot more value for me today. So, whatever that is for you, I guess the key is just we obviously all have to do stuff for work or to appease our boss or whatever that is. But I just think it's an important thing to consider, make sure the places you're going to are fulfilling you, and make sure that there is work that you're doing out there that is ultimately, feeding your greater vision or your mantra as a photographer or as a creative or whatever that is.
What is your mantra? If you could fly an eco-friendly plane around the world and it could read a message to the world, what would that message be?
Yeah, it's that I want to inspire people to travel, and I want them to seek experiences far outside their comfort zone and ultimately find joy. That's what I do this for, and I get a lot of joy in sharing it to others. And it's why I take the time to engage with people on a daily basis and try to share that work.
A lot of this show is based on people's success stories, and we don't talk, I think, a lot about failure. Is there a time that you failed and kept going, and just really what can we learn from failure? Because all the successful people I have interviewed have failed at some point.
To be honest, I've made tons of failures. I ended up, in a really crappy position in Russia at one time in a jail cell because I had a passport issue that was totally my fault. It was just something that, it wasn't my fault, so to say, but it was my fault because I didn't take the time and I rushed the process of getting there. And I think that I've learned a lot from my failures. I also had pretty big, business fallouts because I never really wanted to be a boss at all. And learning and understanding how that world works and how to manage people and how to be a better, leader in some ways, that's been a huge education for me, massive. So I guess what I'm getting at is the fact that, I think that for me, failure is critical. I embrace it actually, because that's how we learn, So
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. What you do is really solo, but I know you have an assistant, you have an agent, you have a lot of people who work for you now, and that's got to be a whole other challenge. So how do you do it? And, is it finding great people, or do they find you?
Well, I think that surrounding yourself by good people is crucial. And that's one of the things that is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's so challenging to do that. And that's been a huge process for me to do. And honestly, I don't have any advice to anybody except for just look for people that share your vision. And if you can, don't define your business in a way where you're oh, well, I need you to have these, and these attributes, people can always learn, they can always grow. Find people that are proficient, but more importantly, find people that share your vision. And I have, a list of business ethics that I try to live by, and studio ethics, we call them. And if people can support that, then you're going to be surrounded by good people.
I love that. You did a children's book recently. I think there's a lot of people out there who would love to do a children's book. How old are your kids right now?
2 and 4.
2 and 4. Awesome. Those are good ages and busy ages. You must be
Hectic.
full on right now.
Hectic ages,
what did you learn, and what's been the most rewarding part of writing a children's book, and what did you learn from it?
It's simple. When you're making something for adults, you're just having to basically entertain them visually. And, with like little bits of, photographs do that wonderfully. It's pretty straightforward. I feel like when you're a photographer and you make books for adults, but when you make something for kids, you really have to consider, how to like truly get the message across. What is the goal here? How are you creating this so that they can understand it, and so with that children's book, I felt like it was a huge education in like learning how to speak to kids and stuff. And that was one of the most beneficial things that I learned from it.
And what was your nugget of truth you were trying to tell kids?
I just didn't want to pass on some inherent fear of the earth. I wanted them to understand that like this is a place that they can explore and find answers, and that there is I wanted them to see the beauty through the trees, essentially. Like the whole book, the premise of the book is this kid goes around and he's looking for happiness, joy, or whatever you want to call it. And he's kind of like, he's looking, it's all around him, but he's not seeing it. Right. So he has to do one trip, kind of gets bummed out, does another trip, figures it out. For the best, it's a book that's like been critically important to my life as an adult too. So it's not just a children's book, I guess you could say.
What's it called?
The Boy Who Spoke to the Earth.
Oh, I love that. So besides your books, and I know you like the book, The Monkey Wrench Gang, are there any other books you love and recommend?
Anything from Ed Abbey, obviously, anything from Thoreau or John Muir. There's some amazing, awesome writings from obviously John Muir. I'm a huge fan of travels in Alaska and a lot of his early stuff. I kind of collect like older books, and there's some of my favorite things to read and embrace, I guess you could say. But yeah, anything that just like challenges the way we look and view nature or our relationship to nature is usually something that I think is going to be valuable.
Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. I just want to have you answer one more question. What's next, and where can the audience find out more about you? Social media is a great place to learn more about me and to connect and just chat and whatnot. But I guess the next project I'm working on, and the thing I'm most excited to share, is my film Under an Arctic Sky that comes out in probably the next 6 months here. So keep in the loop, and I'll try to share as much as I can. Thank you so much for being on the show, Chris. Everyone listening, his Instagram is probably one of the most beautiful Instagram accounts I've ever seen, at Chris Burkard. I'll put links to all of his social media, his trailers, his website, his books in the show notes. Thank you so much, Chris, for being on. And thanks for everyone listening. Well, Chris has definitely done and seen a ton at a very young age. One thing we didn't get into, and we're going to have him back on for round 2, is that Russian jail experience. I was a little curious about that, and Chris said he'll come back on for round 2 to tell us all about it. Thank you to those of you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you liked this show, please tell your friends. And don't forget, the best adventures happen when you follow your wildest ideas. I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week.